Three ungrateful children decided to get rid of their elderly parents once and for all. They discarded Rosa and Antonio on a deserted road, leaving them to their own luck to die under the scorching sun. "You are a burden we can no longer bear," they said, before speeding off in the black Mercedes, disappearing into the horizon. But these cold-hearted monsters didn't know they were throwing away 20 million reais. Rosa woke up that morning with a tightness in her chest she knew well. It wasn't physical pain. After 70 years of life, she knew the difference. It was that anguish that rises in the soul when you feel you are no longer welcome in the place that should be your home. The house was silent, but it was a heavy silence, charged with tension. Antonio was still sleeping beside her, breathing with difficulty due to his age and the heart problems that worried them so much. She watched him for a moment, tracing the wrinkles time had drawn on the face of the man she had loved for 50 years. A face marked by honest work, by sleepless nights when the children were sick, by smiles given even when everything seemed difficult. "How did we get here, my love?" she murmured softly, lightly touching his grey hair. Rosa got up slowly, every movement a battle against joints that complained. In the kitchen, she began to prepare breakfast as she always did, even knowing she would be met with frowns and complaints about the cost of food. "Mom, this waste again?" Sandra appeared at the kitchen door, still in her bathrobe, but with an expression that would freeze anyone's blood. "Look how many eggs you're frying. We don't have money to spare to fund this extravagance." Rosa felt her heart tighten again. Only 3 eggs for 4 people. Where was the extravagance in that? "Daughter, I thought you all might want to eat something before leaving for work. I eat on the street. It's cheaper than supporting this waste every day." Sandra threw a pile of medical bills onto the kitchen table with a dry thud. "By the way, look at what arrived yesterday. Another 500 reais in medicine for Dad." 500 reais, Mom. That's more than half of what I spend on myself in a whole month." Rosa looked at the bills scattered on the table, as if they were accusations. Every prescription, every exam, every pill had become a reason for an argument, proof that they were an unbearable burden to their children. "Sandra, daughter, the doctor said these are essential medicines for your father's heart." "Essential?" Sandra let out a bitter laugh that cut through the kitchen air. "You know what's essential? Me being able to pay my own bills without having to support 2 people who contribute nothing to this house." The words hit Rosa like knives. Contribute nothing. Was that what she had become in her own daughter's eyes? A woman who had raised 3 children, sewn their clothes, cooked their meals, spent nights awake when they were sick, who had taken in laundry to wash when money was tight. Now she contributed nothing. Antonio appeared in the kitchen, stumbling a little from the morning dizziness that came with his blood pressure medication. His face was still marked by the pillow, but Rosa saw in his eyes that he had heard the argument. "Good morning, daughter," he said to Sandra, trying to smile as he always did. Even when everything seemed to be collapsing around them, Sandra didn't even answer. She grabbed a slice of bread, spread a thin layer of margarine, and left the kitchen chewing angrily, as if every bite were a protest against her parents' existence. Rosa served coffee to Antonio with trembling hands. They sat at the table in silence, eating slowly, each lost in thoughts too painful to share. "She didn't mean it," Antonio murmured, but his voice lacked conviction. "She did, my dear. And she's right." Rosa looked at her plate as if she could find an answer there. "We've become a burden to them." "Rosa, don't talk like that. It's the truth, Antonio. Look at how we live here. Afraid to turn on an extra light, afraid to eat an extra egg, afraid to exist." The sound of the front door opening interrupted the conversation. Roberto arrived from his night shift at the factory, his uniform dirty with grease and an expression of exhaustion that seemed permanently etched on his face. He entered the kitchen, looked at his parents seated at the table, and sighed deeply like someone preparing to face yet another problem. "Dad, I need to talk to you." His voice had a formal, distant tone that Rosa didn't recognize. This wasn't the boy she had comforted when he had nightmares. "Of course, son. What is it?" Roberto pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. "The situation cannot continue like this. Sandra is right when she says the medical expenses are becoming unsustainable." Rosa felt the ground drop out from under her feet. Roberto had always been the most balanced of the 3, the one who tried to mediate arguments, if even he was. "Son, We can try to reduce the medications, talk to the doctor about cheaper options. Antonio spoke with a choked voice. It's not just that, Dad, it's everything. The food, the electricity, the water, the space. This house doesn't hold 5 adult people. Rosa chewed on those words in her mind. When had they ceased to be parents and become just adult people to their own children? We're thinking of a solution, Roberto continued, avoiding his parents' gaze. A solution that would be better for everyone. What kind of solution? Rosa asked, though she already knew she didn't want to hear the answer. There's a place, a home for the elderly. It's not a bad one. It's in a decent neighborhood. You would have medical assistants, other people your age to talk to. You want to put us in a home? Antonio's voice came out as a whisper. It's not putting you away, Dad. It's an opportunity for you to have a life more suited to your age. Rosa felt tears burning in her eyes. Roberto, this house was built brick by your father. Every corner has our family's history. Mom, please don't complicate things. The situation is unsustainable. Bruno appeared at the kitchen door at that moment, still in pajamas despite it being almost noon. At 32 years old, he still lived with his parents, but treated the house as if it were a hotel where he had the right to complain about the service. Are you talking about the nursing home? He asked, yawning. It's about time. Yesterday, I couldn't sleep properly again because of Dad's coughing and Mom getting up at dawn to go to the bathroom. It's not a nursing home, Bruno. Roberto tried to correct him, but without much conviction. Whatever the name is. The important thing is to resolve this situation fast. My girlfriend doesn't even want to come here anymore because she gets embarrassed seeing you two in the corners. Bruno's words were like precise daggers to Rosa's heart. Embarrassed. They embarrass people simply by existing. Antonio stood up slowly, every movement seemingly requiring superhuman effort. I'm going for a walk, he murmured. He knew he was going out to cry where his children couldn't see. Antonio had always been like that. He kept his pain to himself to protect others from his sadness. Mom, Roberto tried a softer tone. We're not doing this out of malice. It's just that life has become very difficult for everyone. Rosa looked at her son, who had been her pride, the first to get a steady job, the one who always brought his entire paycheck home when he lived with them. Where was that responsible boy who promised to take care of his parents when they got old? I understand, son. You have your lives, your commitments. So you accept going to the nursing home. Rosa remained silent for a long moment. Through the kitchen window, she could see Antonio in the small garden he maintained with such affection, despite his back pain. He was standing before the tomato plants he had grown, shoulders slumped under the weight of rejection. We need to talk, she finally said. Let us think. Don't take too long. Sandra appeared again, already dressed to leave. I've already scheduled a visit there for tomorrow. The sooner we resolve this, the better for everyone. Rosa watched her 3 children leave the house, Roberto to sleep before his next shift, Sandra to work, Bruno to meet friends at the bar, as he did every afternoon. The house fell silent again, but now it was a different silence. It was the silence of abandonment approaching like a storm. She went out to the garden and found Antonio sitting on the small bench he had built years ago, back when the grandchildren still visited and played among the plants. Did you hear? He asked without looking at her. I heard. 50 years of marriage, Rosa. 3 children raised with so much love. I know, my dear. Did we fail? Were we bad parents? Rosa sat beside her husband and held his hand, calloused from work. We gave everything we had, Antonio. Everything we had, everything we were. And now we are a burden. They sat there holding hands, looking at the garden that soon would no longer be theirs. The flowers Rosa planted with such care, the herbs she grew to flavor meals no one thanked her for anymore, the fruits Antonio harvested with pride, all would be left behind. Rosa, Antonio said softly, if we go to that place, it will be to die. She knew he was right. They knew other people who had been put in nursing homes by their children. Few lasted more than a year, not because of medical care, but because of a broken heart. At least we'll be together, she murmured, squeezing his hand. But deep in her chest, Rosa felt something was about to change. She didn't know what, didn't know how, but there was a strange restlessness in the air, as if fate were preparing something none of them could imagine. Inside Antonio's old wallet, tucked between old photographs of the children from when they still loved them, was a yellowed envelope he didn't even know existed. An envelope that had arrived years ago and that Rosa had stored away without opening, thinking it was just more bank spam. Fate has its own plans, and sometimes justice arrives when we least expect it, coming from the most unexpected places. 3 weeks passed since the conversation in the kitchen, and the atmosphere in the house had become unbearable. Rosa woke up every day with a knot in her stomach, as if she sensed something terrible approaching. Antonio could barely eat, and she knew it wasn't just because of the heart medication. The children had completely changed their behavior. There were no casual conversations, no good morning or good night. They entered and exited the house like irritated tenants who barely tolerated the presence of the landlords. On that fateful morning, Rosa was in the laundry room hanging clothes when she heard low voices coming from the living room. She immediately recognized the conspiratorial tone. It was the same tone the children used when they were little and plotting some mischief. But now, the mischief was directed at them. "Is everything arranged?" It was Sandra's voice, whispering as if planning a crime. Roberto already settled with the nursing home staff. They're coming to pick them up this afternoon. Rosa felt her legs go weak. Today? They hadn't even been warned. And what if they don't want to go? Bruno asked. Rosa could imagine the look of contempt on her youngest son's face. "Are they going?" Roberto replied, with a firmness that froze Rosa's blood. "Because they have no choice." "Did you explain that it's temporary?" Sandra asked. But there was something in her voice Rosa couldn't decipher, a strange hesitation. "Of course it's not temporary," Bruno laughed softly. "Do you know any old person who came back from the asylum?" Rosa's world collapsed in that instant. She leaned on the washing machine to keep from falling. They were talking about getting rid of their parents forever, like someone discarding old furniture. "We'll say it's just until they adapt better," Roberto continued. Later they'll get used to it there." "And the house?" Sandra asked. "Finally, we'll have space to live like normal people." "I've already thought about that," Bruno replied with an excitement that cut Rosa's heart like a blade. "I can turn their room into my office. I've always wanted to work from home." Rosa covered her mouth with her hands to stifle the sob threatening to escape. The room where she and Antonio had shared 50 years of dreams, fears, joys, and sorrows would be turned into an office for the son who had never worked properly in his life. "When they arrive, we'll all be here together," Roberto instructed like a general commanding a military operation. "It has to look like we're doing this out of love. Understood? Out of love," Sandra repeated. And Rosa caught the venomous sarcasm in her daughter's voice. "That's right. We'll cry a little. We'll say it's hard for us too that we'll visit them every week." "Are we going to visit?" Bruno asked, and Rosa sensed genuine surprise in the question. "Obviously not," Roberto laughed softly. "But they don't need to know that right now." Rosa left the laundry room stumbling, feeling as if she had been punched in the stomach. She found Antonio in the garden, watering the tomatoes with mechanical movements, lost in thoughts she knew were as painful as hers. "Antonio," she whispered, gripping his arm tightly. He turned and saw the despair stamped on his wife's face. "What is it, my dear?" "They're coming to get us today." Antonio dropped the hose. The water continued to run, soaking the earth around the tomato plants he would never see grow. "What do you mean?" Rosa told him everything she had heard, every poisoned word, every cruel plan. Antonio grew paler until he was the color of old paper. "Without even warning us," he murmured, his voice coming out like the whimper of a wounded animal. "Antonio, they don't want us anymore, for real. Forever." They embraced right there in the middle of the garden, crying like two lost children. 50 years of marriage, 3 children raised with unconditional love, a whole life of work and dedication, and this was how it would end. An hour later, Rosa was in the bedroom packing some clothes into an old suitcase when Sandra appeared at the door. "Mom, I need to talk to you." Rosa didn't answer. She continued folding the clothes with automatic movements, as if preparing for an ordinary trip. "Mom, listen." Sandra entered the room with decided steps. "Some people from the nursing home are here. They came to pick you up." "I know." Rosa didn't look up from the clothes. "How do you know?" "I heard you talking." Rosa's voice came out cold, cutting. "I heard everything." Sandra had the decency to look embarrassed for a moment. She looked at her feet, fidgeted with her hands, sighed deeply. But when she raised her head again, her expression had hardened once more. Then you know it's for everyone's good. For your good. For our good meant staying in the house we built with so much love. Mom, please don't make this difficult. The staff is waiting downstairs. Rosa finally looked at her daughter. Sandra was dressed in expensive clothes, her nails done, her hair perfectly styled. She looked like an executive explaining an inevitable layoff. Sandra, Rosa spoke slowly, every word weighing tons. Do you remember when you were 5 and had pneumonia? Do you remember I went 2 weeks without sleeping, caring for you day and night? Mom, that was a long time ago. Do you remember when Roberto broke his arm and we didn't have money for a private doctor, so I sold my wedding ring to pay for the hospital? Sandra looked away. Things were different back then. Do you remember when Bruno lost his first job and went 6 months without working, and we shared our food with him even while we were in need? Mom, stop it. No, daughter, I won't stop. Rosa stood up, and for the first time in months, Sandra saw strength in her mother's posture. Because now that it's our turn to be in need, you treat us like garbage. We aren't treating anyone like garbage. We're trying to find the best solution. The best solution for whom, Sandra? Before Sandra could answer, Roberto appeared at the bedroom door. Mom, the staff from the home is waiting. They have scheduled appointments in other places. Rosa looked at her 2 children in the doorway. Roberto avoided her eyes, looking anywhere but at her. Sandra tapped her fingers on the doorframe, anxious to end the situation. Where is Bruno? Rosa asked. Him? He had to go out. Roberto lied badly. Rosa knew Bruno didn't even have the courage to show up. The coward had fled so he wouldn't have to witness the farewell. I'll call your father, she said, closing the suitcase with a click that sounded like a final sentence. Antonio was in the living room, sitting on a chair like a defendant awaiting sentencing. Beside him, 2 uniformed women waited with professional smiles, trained to disguise the sadness of the situation. Mr. Antonio. One of them spoke with a voice too sweet, too artificial. You're going to like our home very much. There's a garden, there are other people your age, there's medical assistance. Antonio didn't answer. He just looked at his hands as if they could give him some answer to this nightmare. He's not feeling very well today, Roberto explained to the women. He's a bit confused because of his age. Rosa came down the stairs and saw the scene, her husband being treated like a problematic child, the children anxious to get rid of the problem. The nursing home staff pretending this was normal. Let's go, Antonio. Rosa extended her hand to her husband. It seems our presence here is no longer desired. Mom, don't talk like that. Sandra tried a conciliatory tone. We love you. Rosa stopped in the middle of the room and turned to her children. Roberto still avoided her eyes. Sandra feigned a sadness she didn't feel. Bruno remained absent, the coward he had always been. If you loved us truly, Rosa spoke with a voice that cut the air like a sharp blade, you never would have let it come to this point. Mom, if you loved us truly, you would have talked to us before scheduling this removal. We are talking now. Roberto tried to argue. You are communicating a decision you already made. That is not a conversation, son. That is eviction. One of the employees cleared her throat discreetly. Sorry to interrupt, but we really have other commitments today. Rosa took Antonio's hand and squeezed it tight. He was trembling, and she knew it wasn't just from the cold. All right, she said finally. Let's go. The walk to the van was the longest of Rosa's life. Every step on the sidewalk she had swept thousands of times. Every look at the garden Antonio cared for with such love. Every breath of air from the house where they had been happy for so many years. The neighbors appeared at their windows, some with pity, others with morbid curiosity. Donna Lourdes, the 60-year-old neighbor, waved sadly. She knew what was happening. Everyone knew. Roberto and Sandra accompanied them to the van, making a point of looking sad in front of the nursing home staff, but Rosa saw through the cheap acting. We'll visit you next week, Sandra lied, giving her mother a kiss on the cheek that burned like hot iron. We'll call tomorrow to see how you are. Roberto added another lie to the collection. Rosa and Antonio got into the van without looking back. When the vehicle began to move, Rosa saw through the rear window her 2 children walking back into the house quickly, as if they wanted to flee the scene of the crime they had just committed. Rosa, Antonio whispered, squeezing her hand. "How did we get here?" "I don't know, my love. I don't know." The van continued down the street they knew by heart, passing the bakery where they bought bread every morning, the pharmacy where they picked up medicine, the square where they took the grandchildren to play when they were still welcome in their children's lives. Every block that distanced itself was a piece of life being left behind forever. In Antonio's old wallet, tucked among old documents, the yellowed envelope remained sealed. Beside it, news that would change everything, but which would only be discovered when it was already too late for the children who had thrown away the purest love they would ever receive. Fate was preparing its own justice, and when it arrived, it would be ruthless. 2 weeks in the nursing home, Rosa woke up once again to the deafening noise of 15 old women coughing at the same time in the collective dormitory. The smell of medicine mixed with urine and disinfectant had become part of the air she breathed, sticking to her skin like a mark of abandonment that wouldn't come off even with a bath. Antonio was in the bed next to her, but he seemed to have shrunk by half since they arrived. His eyes, once bright even in sadness, were now opaque like frosted glass. He barely spoke, barely ate, barely moved. It was as if he were dying little by little, a piece each day. "Antonio," she whispered, extending her hand across the minimal space between the beds. "How did you sleep?" He turned his head slowly, every movement seeming to require superhuman effort. "I dreamed of our garden, Rosa. I dreamed I was watering the tomatoes." Her eyes filled with tears. 2 weeks and the children hadn't called a single time, not once to know if they were still alive. Nurse Josefa, a 50-year-old woman with the face of someone who had lost all patience with life, entered the dormitory clapping her hands as if calling chickens. "Let's go. Breakfast time. Whoever doesn't get up now goes without eating." Rosa helped Antonio stand up. He shook like a leaf in the wind, and she knew it wasn't just age. It was a soul broken into 1,000 pieces. In the cafeteria, they sat at the same table as always with Donna Conceção, who cried softly every morning, and Seu Benedito, who kept calling for sons who never appeared. "My daughter said she was going to visit me yesterday," Donna Conceção murmured while stirring oatmeal that looked like glue. "Do you think she forgot where I am?" Rosa and Antonio looked at each other. They knew Donna Conceção's daughter hadn't forgotten. She simply didn't want to know about her mother anymore, like so many other families who dumped their elderly there and vanished from the map. "Rosa," Antonio whispered, pushing the plate of oatmeal away. "I can't stand this place anymore." "I know, my dear. Neither can I." "If we left..." "Where to, Antonio? Our children don't want us anymore. The house isn't ours anymore." Antonio remained silent for a long moment, chewing on words that hurt too much to be said. Finally, he raised his eyes, and Rosa saw a determination there she hadn't seen in weeks. "Rosa, if we're going to die anyway, let it be on the street, breathing fresh air, not in this place that smells of death." She felt a shiver run down her spine. It wasn't fear. It was something like hope. A desperate hope, but hope nonetheless. "Are you serious?" "I am. We can take our things and leave. We aren't prisoners." "But Antonio, where will we go?" "Anywhere that is far from here. Anywhere where we can die with dignity." 3 days later, in the middle of the night, Rosa had been awake for hours, staring at the peeling ceiling of the dormitory. Beside her, Antonio breathed with difficulty, but she knew he wasn't sleeping either. They had spent the last 3 days planning in whispers, like two convicts plotting an escape. The night shift nurse had dozed off in the reception chair, as she always did around 5 a.m. It was the window of opportunity they were waiting for. "Now," Antonio whispered. They got up slowly, every movement calculated not to make noise. Rosa grabbed the plastic bag where she kept her few clothes. Antonio put on his worn coat, his only protection against the morning chill. They walked on tiptoes down the corridor that smelled of despair and abandonment. They passed the reception, where the nurse snored softly, head thrown back on the chair. The front door was locked, but Antonio knew a way. He had observed for days how the staff opened it in the morning. He turned the key slowly, the metal creaking like a muffled scream. The dawn air hit them like a cold slap, but it was the purest air they had breathed in weeks. Rosa held Antonio's hand tightly as if he would disappear if she let go. "Where to now?" she asked, looking at the empty street under the yellow light of the lampposts. "Far away, Rosa," Antonio replied. "As far as possible." They began to walk along the cracked sidewalk, two figures bent by age and suffering, carrying everything that remained of their lives in an old plastic bag. 6 hours later, on the road, the sun was rising when they reached the highway that cut through the city. Rosa felt her legs trembling with fatigue, but she kept walking because she knew stopping meant giving up, and she wasn't ready to give up yet. Antonio stopped every few meters, placing his hand on his chest and breathing with difficulty. His heart was crying out for help, but he pretended he was fine so as not to worry Rosa further. "Let's rest a little," she said, when she saw he was becoming too pale. They sat on the dry grass on the side of the road. Traffic was intense. Rushed people going to work, to their organized lives, to families who loved them. "Rosa," Antonio spoke with a weak voice, "do you regret leaving?" "Never." She held his hand firmly. "I'd prefer to die free than live imprisoned in that place." A truck passed by honking, kicking up a cloud of dust that made them cough. Antonio wiped his tearing eyes, and Rosa saw that his breathing was even more labored. "My love, are you feeling ill?" "It's just tiredness," he lied. But Rosa saw he was sweating cold, despite the morning being cool. They continued walking, every step a battle against exhaustion and despair. The road stretched infinitely ahead, and Rosa began to wonder if they had made the right decision. But when she looked back and saw the city diminishing in the distance, she knew she preferred 1,000 times to be there, free and lost, than trapped in that home of horrors. Noon, under the scorching sun. "Rosa, I can't go on." Antonio stopped in the middle of the road, legs weak, face white as paper. The midday sun beat down relentlessly on their heads, and they had no water, no food, nowhere to go. "Antonio, hold on just a little longer. There must be somewhere nearby where we can rest." But she knew she was lying. There was nothing there but hot asphalt, dry brush, and infinite loneliness. They were in the middle of nowhere, two elderly people abandoned by their own family, walking to nowhere. Antonio leaned on her, the full weight of his 78 years pressing on Rosa's fragile shoulders. She felt her own legs weaken, but she forced herself to support the man she had loved for 50 years. "Rosa, I think I'm going to faint." "No, Antonio, no. We're going to make it." But even as she spoke, she felt him becoming heavier and heavier in her arms. His heart was failing. She could see it in his lips, which were beginning to turn blue. "Rosa, I love you." "I love you too, my love. I always have." They embraced right there on the deserted roadside, while the relentless sun punished their fragile bodies. Rosa knew this could be the last hug of their lives. "My God," she whispered, looking at the blue, empty sky. "If you have any mercy, send someone to help us." As if the prayer had been heard, the roar of an engine approached. Rosa raised her head and saw an old car approaching down the road. It wasn't anything luxurious. It was a white Corsa, all dented, with paint peeling from time. The car slowed down when the driver saw the two elderly people hugging on the side of the road. Rosa waved desperately, like a castaway signaling a rescue ship. The car stopped. A young man of about 30 got out, wearing simple workers' clothes. His eyes were kind, the type of person who still believes it's worth helping others. "My God in heaven, what are you doing out here alone?" Marcos ran to them, seeing immediately that Antonio was in very bad shape. "Please," Rosa implored with a broken voice. "My husband has a bad heart. He needs help." Marcos didn't hesitate for a second. "Let's go. I'll take you to the hospital right now." He helped Antonio into the car, Rosa on the other side, holding her husband's hand as if it were a lifeline. Marcos sped toward the nearest city, looking in the rearview mirror to check on the old man. "How did you end up there?" he asked while driving. Rosa didn't know where to start, how to explain they were abandoned by their own children, how to tell that they fled a nursing home because they preferred to die free. "It's a long story," she murmured. "You don't need to tell it now," Marcos said gently. "The important thing is getting to the hospital." During the ride, Rosa observed the young man who had stopped to save them. He had calloused hands from hard work, simple but clean clothes, and above all, he had in his eyes that kindness she had almost forgotten existed in the world. "What is your name, son?" she asked. "Marcos. And you?" "I am Rosa. He is Antonio. Pleasure to meet you. And don't worry, everything will be all right." Rosa didn't know why, but she believed him. For the first time in months, she felt that perhaps fate hadn't completely given up on them. In Antonio's old wallet, the yellowed envelope remained tucked among old documents. Beside it, an inheritance that would change everything. But in that moment, the only inheritance that mattered was the kindness of a stranger who decided to stop to help two old people lost on the road. Sometimes angels arrive driving old cars. 1 week in the hospital, Antonio opened his eyes slowly, blinking against the white light of the hospital room. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. The smell of disinfectant made him fear he had returned to that cursed home. But when he turned his head, he saw Rosa sitting in a chair beside the bed, holding his hand tightly. "You came back to me?" she whispered. And Antonio saw her eyes were red from crying. "Rosa, how long?" "A whole week, my love." "You had a severe heart attack. The doctor said it was close." Antonio tried to remember. The road, the scorching sun, the feeling he was going to die right there, abandoned like an animal. And then an angel, a young man with kindness in his eyes who had saved them. Where is the young man who brought us here?" "Marcos." Rosa smiled for the first time in days. "He's outside. He hasn't left here for a minute since we arrived. He slept in the hallway every night." Antonio felt his eyes fill with tears. A stranger had done for them what their own children hadn't, cared if they lived or died. The door opened softly, and Marcos entered carrying a steaming cup of coffee. His eyes lit up when he saw Antonio awake. "Mr. Antonio, thank God." He put the coffee on a small table and approached the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Alive," Antonio replied with a hoarse but grateful voice. "Thanks to you." "Imagine that. I only did what anyone would do." Rosa and Antonio looked at each other. No, it wasn't what anyone would do. Their own children hadn't done it. "Marcos," Rosa spoke, voice choking up. "Why did you stop? Why did you help us?" The young man turned red, shuffled his feet, looked at the floor. "Ah, Donna Rosa, it's just that you reminded me of my grandparents. They died when I was little, and I always thought, if one day I saw some old folks needing help..." He couldn't finish the sentence. Antonio extended a trembling hand, and Marcos took it carefully, as if holding something precious and fragile. "Son, what did we do to deserve your kindness? You didn't do anything. Sometimes we just meet the right people at the right time." 3 days later, at discharge, Dr. Silva, a 50-year-old man with the face of someone who had seen too much suffering, handed the discharge papers to Rosa with a worried expression. "Donna Rosa, I need to be frank with you. Your husband had a serious heart attack. His heart cannot take any more strong emotions or physical exertion." Rosa nodded, though inside she felt a tightness in her chest. "Doctor, we have nowhere to go." The doctor hesitated, looked at the papers, then at her. "Your family, so do they know you are here?" "They don't want to know about us anymore, Doctor." Dr. Silva sighed deeply. He had seen many cases like this. Elderly people abandoned by their own children, thrown into hospitals like disposable trash. "Look, Donna Rosa, I can't officially recommend this, but..." He lowered his voice. "There is a social worker here who knows a family that takes in elderly people in street situations. Good-hearted people. Do good people still exist in the world? They do, and you've already met one of them." He pointed to Marcos, who was in the hallway talking to a blonde woman of about 40. Rosa looked through the room window and saw Marcos gesturing animatedly, as if explaining something important. The blonde woman listened attentively, nodding. "Who is she?" "That's Anna, his wife. Marcos called her yesterday and... well, better let him tell you himself." An hour later, in the hospital corridor, Marcos approached Rosa with a shy smile, accompanied by the blonde woman she had seen through the window. "Donna Rosa, this is my wife, Anna." Anna stepped forward and, to Rosa's surprise, hugged her as if they were old acquaintances. "Rosa, Marcos told me everything about you, about what your children did, about how you fled that horrible place." Rosa didn't know what to say. Anna spoke with genuine indignation, as if their pain were hers too. "Anna and I talked a lot over the last few days," Marcos continued, holding his wife's hand, "and we would like to make a proposal." Rosa felt her heart race. Were they going to offer money? Some job? She didn't want to be treated as charity. What kind of proposal? Anna crouched down to be at eye level with Rosa, who was sitting in a wheelchair. Rosa, Marcos and I have been married for 10 years and never managed to have children. We always dreamed of having a big family, with grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. And when I saw you on that road, Marcos completed the thought. It was as if God had placed the grandparents we never had in our path. Rosa felt tears running down her face. What are you saying? We are saying we want you to come live with us, Anna said firmly. As family, as the parents we never had. But you don't know us. We know enough, Marcos interrupted. We know you are good people who were treated badly by your own family, and we know you deserve love and care. Rosa cried so much she couldn't speak. It was too good to be true. After so much suffering, so much rejection, two angels appeared offering not charity, but true love. And if we are trouble for you? If we get sick? If... Rosa, Anna held her hands firmly. When we love someone truly, there is no trouble. There is care. 2 weeks later, in Marcos and Anna's house, Rosa woke up in the small but cozy room Marcos and Anna had arranged especially for them. The flowered curtains let in soft light, and she could hear Antonio breathing peacefully in the bed next to her. For the first time in months, she had slept a whole night without nightmares. In the kitchen, Anna was preparing breakfast, humming a happy song. When she saw Rosa, her face lit up. "Good morning, Mom Rosa. Mom Rosa." The two sweetest words she had heard in a long time. "Good morning, daughter. How did you sleep?" "I slept well." "And Papa Antonio?" Rosa smiled. "Papa Antonio." Antonio had cried when Anna called him that for the first time. "He is still sleeping. The doctor said he needs a lot of rest." "Of course. And he will have all the time in the world to rest here." Marcos entered the kitchen, already dressed for work, and kissed Rosa on the cheek, as he did every morning. "Good morning, Mum. What are we having for lunch today?" "I thought about making that roast chicken you liked so much yesterday." "Perfect. But if you're tired, Anna can cook. Imagine that, son. Cooking for you is a joy." And it really was. After years of being treated like a nuisance in her own kitchen, Rosa had rediscovered the pleasure of cooking for people who were grateful, who gave compliments, who asked for seconds. Marcos left for work with a smile on his face, and Anna sat at the table with Rosa to have coffee. "Rosa, I need to tell you something." Anna's serious tone made Rosa worry. "What is it, daughter?" "Yesterday, while you were resting, a mailman came here. He said he's been looking for Antonio Mendez for weeks." Rosa frowned. "Antonio Mendez? That is my husband's full name." "I know, and he brought this." Anna picked up a thick official envelope from atop the refrigerator. "He said it's urgent." Rosa took the envelope with trembling hands. It was heavy, official, with the stamp of a law firm. What could it be? "I don't know, Mom, but I think we better wake Papa Antonio to open it together." Half an hour later, in the living room, Antonio was sitting on the comfortable sofa, still in pajamas, holding the envelope like a bomb about to explode. Rosa was beside him, Anna and Marcos in the armchairs opposite, all with anxious expressions. "Open it, Antonio," Rosa whispered. "Whatever it is, we face it together." Antonio tore the envelope slowly. Inside were several documents, all with official letterheads and notary seals. His eyes scanned the lines, trying to decipher the complicated legal language. Suddenly, he went as white as a sheet. "Rosa, this can't be right." "What is it? What is written there?" Antonio shook his head, reread the document, shook his head again. "It says that my grandfather... Old Sebastião, what about your grandfather, Antonio? He had properties, many properties, and now... Now they are mine." Anna and Marcos looked at each other. "What kind of properties, Papa?" Antonio looked at the document one more time, as if the words would magically change. 10 buildings in the city center, all rented out, and his voice failed. "And a sum of money that has been earning interest for 20 years. "How much money, Antonio?" Rosa asked with a trembling voice. Antonio turned the page, looked for the number that would change their lives forever. 20 million reais, Rosa. 20 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Anna put her hand to her mouth. Marcos leaned back in the armchair as if he had been punched. 20 million, Rosa repeated without being able to process the information. It says here they were trying to locate me for years, that they sent letters to our old address. But... Antonio stopped, understanding everything at once. But what? The letters must have arrived when we were already living with the boys. They must have intercepted everything. Rosa felt a dull rage rising in her chest. The children, they knew about the inheritance and even so had abandoned them to die. Rosa! Antonio looked at her with tears in his eyes. We are rich. After a whole life of poverty, of humiliation, of contempt. We are rich. But instead of joy, Rosa felt a deep sadness. What good was money now? When the children she loved most in the world had rejected her, Anna stood up and hugged them both. Papa, Mama, this is wonderful. It is, Rosa murmured, but it arrived too late. Marcos approached and put a hand on Antonio's shoulder. It didn't arrive late, Papa. It arrived at the right time. At the time when you finally found a family that loves you for real. Rosa looked at those two young people who had opened their hearts and their home to two abandoned old folks. Marcos was right. The money hadn't arrived late. It had arrived exactly when they needed it, when they finally had a true family to share the happiness with. But she knew that when the children found out about the inheritance, they would come crawling back, crying crocodile tears, asking for forgiveness they didn't feel. And this time, Rosa knew exactly what she was going to say to them. 1 month after the discovery of the inheritance, Rosa was hanging clothes on the backyard line when she felt a cold shiver run down her spine. It was a sunny Saturday morning. Anna had gone to the market and Marcos was fixing the kitchen faucet. Everything was absolutely normal. But there was something in the air, an electric tension that made the hairs on her arms stand up, like when a storm is approaching. Antonio appeared at the back door, leaning on the cane the doctor had recommended after the heart attack. His face, which had regained color and life in recent weeks, was pale as old paper. Rosa, he whispered, voice trembling. There is a black car parked on our street. It's been there for 20 minutes. She dropped the wet laundry into the basket and ran inside the house, heart beating unevenly in her chest. Through the living room window, she could see the side of a new Mercedes gleaming under the morning sun like a silent threat. They found us, she murmured, the words coming out like a death sentence. How? How did they manage? Rosa didn't answer because she knew the answer. Money. Money buys everything. Even the location of two old people who only wanted to live in peace. 15 minutes of silent torture later. The doors of the Mercedes opened simultaneously, as if they had rehearsed that moment. Roberto stepped out from the driver's side, adjusting his expensive tie with calculated movements. Sandra emerged from the passenger seat, like a queen descending from her carriage, her high heels making noise on the asphalt, like hammers hitting a coffin. Bruno got out last, yawning and stretching, as if waking up before noon were unbearable torture. The three walked toward the small gate of the house, with the arrogance of those who know they have power. There was no haste in their movements, no anxiety to see their parents again. It was the confident walk of predators who had finally cornered their prey. Rosa watched through the curtain, feeling her stomach contract like a clenched fist. Roberto had gained weight, a sign he was eating well. Very well. Sandra wore diamond earrings that shone so bright they hurt the eyes. Bruno wore a shirt that cost more than an entire month's electricity bill. They are doing well, she murmured bitterly, very well off with the money they saved by getting rid of us. The doorbell rang. A simple, common sound that sounded like a funeral bell that morning. Antonio rose from the armchair where he was reading the newspaper, every movement seeming to require superhuman courage. Shall I open it? No. Rosa held her husband's arm tightly. We open it together. They don't deserve for one of us to face this humiliation alone. At the gate, face to face with the past. When Rosa opened the door, the first thought she had was how strange her children looked to her. Not physically. Physically they remained the same. But there was something in their eyes, in their posture, in the way they looked at her. that made her feel as if she was standing before three malicious strangers. "Mum," Roberto spoke first, but the words sounded mechanical, rehearsed like a line memorized from amateur theater. "Dad." Sandra nodded, but made no motion to approach for a hug or even a kiss on the cheek. Bruno didn't even speak, just looked around with an expression of someone evaluating a property for purchase. "What do you want here?" Rosa asked, surprising herself with the firmness of her own voice. "What kind of question is that, Mum?" Roberto forced a smile that wouldn't fool a child. "We came to see how you are. We were worried." Antonio let out a bitter laugh that cut through the morning air. Worried after 2 months of absolute silence, Sandra took a step forward, trying to take control of the situation with that authoritarian manner Rosa knew so well. "Dad, we explained at the time that it was for your own good. The nursing home was the best place." "The best place was hell on earth," Antonio exploded, his voice echoing down the quiet street. "Did you know that when you dumped us there?" Some neighbors began to appear at their windows, drawn by the raised tone of the conversation. Donna Lourdes, the 70-year-old neighbor who lived in the house next door, opened the curtain discreetly, but Rosa could feel her curious eyes watching the scene. "Dad, please don't talk like that." Roberto looked nervously to the sides, clearly uncomfortable with the attention they were attracting. "Let's talk inside like civilized people." "Our civilized people." Rosa felt a dull anger rising from her chest, like lava from a volcano. "Civilized people don't abandon their own parents on a deserted road." Bruno finally spoke with that tone of impatience he always used when things didn't go his way. "Look, can you stop with all this drama? We came here to resolve this situation once and for all." "And what situation?" Antonio asked, though deep down he already knew the answer. Sandra and Roberto exchanged a quick glance. That silent communication Rosa had known since they were children and had done some mischief. "The inheritance situation, Dad." Roberto spoke the words slowly, as if explaining math to a child. "Grandpa Sebastian's inheritance." The silence that followed was so deep that Rosa could hear her own heart beating unevenly in her chest. "How do you know about that?" she managed to ask. "We always knew, Mom," Sandra replied with a naturalness that froze Rosa's blood. "The letters from the law firm have been arriving at the house for years. We kept everything waiting for the right moment." "The right moment for what?" "To resolve the family situation once and for all," Bruno replied, taking his cell phone out of his pocket and checking messages as if the conversation were merely an inconvenience in his schedule. 20 minutes later, in the living room. As much as it hurt to admit, Rosa had let the children in, not out of love or longing. Those feelings had died on that morning of abandonment, but because she knew this conversation was inevitable and preferred to have it on familiar territory. The three children settled onto the sofa as if they owned the house. Roberto crossed his legs and adjusted his expensive jacket. Sandra took a small mirror from her designer bag and touched up her blood-red lipstick. Bruno continued messing with his phone, clearly bored with the whole situation. Rosa and Antonio sat in the armchairs opposite, keeping their distance, as if their children were wild animals that could attack at any moment. "So," Roberto began, assuming that executive tone he used when he wanted to intimidate someone. "Let's get straight to the point. You inherited 20 million reais and 10 properties from great-grandpa. That is family money." "That is ours," Rosa corrected, her voice cutting like a blade. "Inheritance left to Antonio, not to you." "Mom, please." Sandra sighed dramatically, as if Rosa were a stubborn child. "You are in your 70s. What do you need so much money for?" "What do we need it for?" Antonio rose from the armchair with difficulty, leaning on his cane but with a dignity Rosa hadn't seen in months. "To live with dignity. To not depend on anyone. To never be treated like garbage again." "Nobody treated you like garbage." Bruno spoke for the first time since entering, without even looking up from his phone. "We found the best solution for a difficult situation." "Solution?" Rosa laughed, but there was no humor in the laugh. "You threw us into a home of horrors and vanished from the face of the earth." "It was a decent place," Sandra argued, crossing her legs and adjusting her expensive skirt. "It had nursing, food, a roof. It had the smell of death in every corner," Antonio shouted, and Rosa saw his hands shaking with contained rage. "It had old people crying for children who never visited. It had people dying of sadness. Roberto leaned forward, assuming a more aggressive posture. Dad, you are being dramatic. The important thing is that now we found a solution for all the problems. What solution? You come back home with us, Sandra announced, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. So we take care of you, and the inheritance money stays in the family where it always should have stayed. Rosa felt the world spin around her. The audacity, the nerve, the complete lack of shame of these three beings who had come out of her womb was heartbreaking. Home, she whispered. What home? Your house, where we were treated like nuisances. The house where we couldn't even breathe without bothering you. Mom, things were different back then. Roberto tried a conciliatory tone that rang false as a three-wheel bill. Now that we know about the inheritance, now everything can be different. Rosa stood up too, and for the first time in months, Sandra seemed slightly intimidated. Now that there's money involved, you remember you have parents. At that moment, the front door opened, and Anna entered carrying grocery bags. She stopped in the middle of the room, analyzing the scene with eyes trained to detect danger. Immediately, she sensed the tension in the air. She saw Rosa and Antonio with expressions of pain, and the three elegant strangers sitting on the sofa as if they owned the place. Hi, Anna, she said simply, but there was ice in her voice. The three children turned to her like hawks spotting prey. Sandra examined her from top to bottom. Simple clothes from the market, hair tied in a practical ponytail, calloused hands of someone who works. And you are? Sandra asked with an arrogance that made Anna grip the bag handles tightly. I am Anna, their daughter. The silence that followed was so heavy it seemed solid. Bruno finally raised his eyes from his phone. Roberto straightened in the armchair. Sandra arched a perfectly drawn eyebrow. Daughter. Bruno let out a sarcastic chuckle. How interesting. Our parents have been doing adoptions. Anna set the bags on the floor with controlled movements, but Rosa could see she was boiling with rage inside. You don't need adoption when you gain parents who love you for real, Anna replied, looking directly into Bruno's eyes. And when you return that love instead of throwing them away like trash. The sentence cut the air like a whip crack. Roberto stood up from the sofa, face red with indignation. Listen here, lady. You don't know anything about our family. You don't know anything about our history. I know enough, Anna replied without backing down a millimeter. I know I found them abandoned, sick, with broken hearts because of the cruelty of their own children. I know they cried every night asking what they had done wrong to deserve such contempt. Sandra tried a different approach, forcing a maternal tone that fooled no one. Anna, is it? Look, Anna, we appreciate very much that you took care of our parents during this difficult period. We can even compensate you financially for the work you had. Work? Anna let out a laugh that had no humor in it. I didn't have work. I gained the wonderful parents I always dreamed of having. How touching, Bruno murmured, going back to his phone. But playing house is over. Our parents are coming back home with us. Playing? Anna approached the sofa like a lioness protecting her cubs. The only game here is you pretending to be children after having abandoned your parents to die on a road. Rosa watched everything as if it were a surreal movie. On one side, three people who had come from her own body, whom she had loved unconditionally for decades. On the other, a young woman who had chosen to love them when they needed it most. And she realized with painful clarity who really deserved to be called family. Enough, she said, and her voice cut through all other conversations. Enough of this discussion. Everyone turned to her, waiting. Rosa took a deep breath, looked at each of her three children. Roberto with his business arrogance, Sandra with her calculating coldness, Bruno with his lazy contempt, and she felt a strange peace invading her heart. Finally, she knew what she had to do. At the moment of the final decision, Rosa looked at each of the three children, the beings who had grown in her womb, whom she had fed with her own milk, who had been her reason for living for decades, and felt a strange calm invade her heart. It was as if a fog had lifted from her mind, leaving everything crystal clear. Do you want to know our decision? She asked, voice coming out firm as stone. Roberto straightened on the sofa, confident that the money would speak louder than any hurt. Sandra crossed her legs elegantly, already imagining how she would spend the inheritance. Bruno didn't even look up from his phone. Our decision, Rosa continued, every word weighing tons, is that you leave our house now. The silence that followed was absolute. The world stopped. Even the clock on the wall seemed to stop ticking. Roberto blinked several times, as if he hadn't processed the words. What do you mean, Mum? Like I said, get out of here and never come back. Sandra let out a nervous giggle, the kind she always let out when something didn't go as planned. Mum, you can't be serious. I am more serious than I have ever been in my life. Bruno finally lifted his head from the phone, his expression changing from boredom to incredulity. You can't kick us out. We are your children. Children? Antonio stood up from the armchair, leaning on his cane, but with a dignity Rosa hadn't seen in months. Children don't abandon their parents on a road to die. Dad, children don't intercept inheritance letters and lie for years. We can explain. Children don't come back after 2 months just because they found out there's money involved. 5 minutes of desperate attempts later. Roberto stood up from the sofa, face red with indignation and panic. Dad, Mom, you can't do this. That money is family money. It is our right. Right? Rosa let out a laugh that cut the air like a razor. You lost any right when you threw us away like trash. Sandra tried one last card, forcing tears that convinced not even herself. Mom, please, we made a mistake, okay? We admit we made a mistake, but now we want to fix everything. Fix? Anna stepped forward, fists clenched. Do you want to fix things, or do you want to ensure access to the inheritance? Bruno exploded, totally losing his composure. Listen here, you busybody. That money is ours by blood right. You are nothing to them. We are everything to them. Marcos appeared at the door at that moment, still in his work uniform, but with an authority that made the 3 children instinctively recoil. We are the family they chose when their blood family abandoned them. Roberto tried to intimidate. You have no legal right over our parents. We can take legal action. Can you really? Marcos smiled, but there was no humor in the smile. And are you going to explain to the judge how you abandoned 2 elderly people on a road? How you institutionalized them by force in a home of horrors? How you never visited, never called, never cared if they were alive or dead? The threat echoed in the air like a gunshot. The 3 children looked at each other, realizing they had lost all their cards. 10 minutes later at the gate. This isn't over, Sandra screamed while walking toward the Mercedes, high heels clicking on the asphalt like gunshots. You will regret this. We already regret it, Rosa replied from the porch, voice calm as still water. We regret having raised 3 children without hearts. Bruno turned one last time, face contorted with pure hate. When you die, that money will be ours by law anyway. If you are so confident in that, Antonio spoke, supported by Ana and Marcos as if they were his human crutches, why don't you wait patiently? Roberto got into the car with abrupt movements, started the engine, and accelerated hard, making the tires screech on the asphalt. The black Mercedes disappeared around the corner like a storm cloud moving away. The neighbors who had appeared at the windows during the argument began to disperse, some shaking their heads with disapproval, others commenting softly on the scene they had witnessed. Rosa felt her legs wobble and leaned on the porch railing. All the adrenaline of the confrontation was leaving her body, leaving her exhausted. It's over, she whispered. It is over. Yes, Mom Rosa. Anna hugged her tightly. And you were brave as a lioness. 1 week later, at the lawyer's office. Dr. Pereira, a grizzled man of 60 with gold-rimmed glasses, organized the papers on the mahogany desk with precise movements. Rosa, Antonio, Anna, and Marcos were seated in the leather chairs waiting. So, Mr. Antonio, Mrs. Rosa, everything is resolved. The inheritance is officially transferred to you. And about our children, Rosa began. They have no legal right whatsoever to the inheritance while you are alive. And afterwards? Dr. Pereira smiled. Well, that will depend on the will you make. Rosa and Antonio looked at each other. They knew exactly what they wanted to do. 2 years later, Marcos and Anna's simple house had transformed into a home full of life. With part of the inheritance, they had expanded the building, created a larger garden where Antonio cultivated his plants, and principally opened the doors to other abandoned elderly people who needed love and care. Rosa was in the kitchen preparing lunch for 8 people. Besides the 4 of them, there was Donna Conceição, whom they took out of the nursing home. So João found in a square with nowhere to sleep. Donna Maria abandoned by her children at a bus station. And so Pedro, whose children moved abroad and never sent news again. "Grandma Rosa," shouted a child's voice in the garden. Rosa smiled upon hearing the granddaughter she had received as a gift, Ana and Marcos's 3-year-old daughter, born shortly after they moved into the bigger house. Little Helena, named after Rosa's great-grandmother, had brought even more joy to that improvised family. Antonio entered the kitchen, ruddier and healthier than he had been in years. A letter arrived. She looked at the envelope and immediately recognized Roberto's handwriting. It was the 5th letter in 2 years. The others she had burned without opening. "What do you want to do with this one?" Antonio asked. Rosa took the envelope, looked at it for a moment, then threw it straight into the trash. "The same thing they did to us," she replied. "Throw it away." That afternoon, sitting on the porch surrounded by people who truly loved her, Rosa watched the sunset, painting the sky gold. Antonio was by her side, holding her hand as he had for 50 years. Ana and Marcos played with Helena in the garden. The other elderly people chatted animatedly about plans for the next day. This was how a family should be. Not blood, not genes, not legal obligations. Love, care, choice. Rosa closed her eyes and thanked God for the hardest and most valuable lesson of her life. Sometimes, we need to lose the family we have to find the family we deserve. And when Antonio died 3 years later, sleeping peacefully in her arms on a spring morning, the will he left donated the entire inheritance to Ana, Marcos, and the other elderly people who had found family in the house that love built. Roberto, Sandra, and Bruno each received the symbolic sum of R$1, along with a letter that simply said, "For the children who abandoned me when I needed them, I leave the same as you gave me when I needed it most." Nothing sometimes takes time, but it always arrives. And when it arrives, it is perfect.